Hello and welcome to Diegetic Advancement. My name is Riley, and today another episode of updates from Diegetic Advancement. I've been slacking on these. My last update was 2 months ago. There was a break for Christmas in between, so not so bad. And I've been making other posts, so I will forgive myself. Anyway, let's get into the updates. But first, I have a few calls. Okay, and first up I have a call from Daniel from the Bandits Keep.
Riley, just listened to your latest show. Yes, you were definitely one of the people who definitely inspired me to go, yeah, let's just do this. There was a couple of people called in. Joe, of course, reached out privately, and a few people were very down to do it. I think that what happened with me was, first of all, life, as you probably understand. And also, Joe kind of made a good point when he reached out with this APA idea, or APA, and that just seemed like way more than I wanted to handle. I was really thinking like you would just mail to 4 or 5 people yourself and they'd mail to 4 or 5 people. But I think that would be a bit chaotic in the end, and maybe it just really wouldn't work out. So, Joe's idea seemed better, but way more than, I was willing to deal with at the time or even right now. So I was glad that I started talking to Joe again about it and he's taking over the reins. I will definitely be submitting. Insofar as your goals, that's really good. I really should do the same, to be honest, because I feel like I'm often scattered. I have a lot of projects I want to work on. And so a couple comments. I think that, right, if you're making a bunch of adventures and stuff like that, that is like really great, lonely fun. That's kind of what I used to do a lot more of, and I found myself less interested in doing that now that I'm playing solo. So I actually do feel like solo scratches that itch, as does the adventure building. They're kind of the same to me, if that makes sense. Because I don't build adventures for solo, right? I kind of build them as I go. As far as wargaming, I'm also kind of in agreement here. I haven't played a lot, and I haven't been to a lot of these conventions, but it's very satisfying to just sit down and play, and not play like Monopoly, but play something like a war game, and it's just done, one session. You could play multiple sessions, you could play a campaign, but even if you do that, you could do it very spread out, because it's not like you have to remember, what was in that room that we just walked through? Each battle, for the most part, is, complete, and then you just have your results, which might lead to, like, more troops or less troops or whatever. I don't know if you've tried Pulp Alley, but I'm just now finally, I think I've talked about it a couple times, just now finally getting back into playing. I finally painted the miniatures, which motivated me to, and I'm running it at GaryCon, to start playing it again. And man, even after not playing it for like 6 months, just picking it up, it's really great. I have Frustrated as well that I was looking at, but Pulp Alley just, if you like a lot of different genres, I think it's worth looking at. And the rules are free, if I'm not mistaken, online as a PDF, including the cards to play it. It's miniature agnostic, so it might be worth just messing with, because I really feel like, I was jokingly saying when I first started looking at it, this might be the best game ever made, but, in some ways, if you have that role-playing mentality where you can really dive into it and be creative, I think it's really one of the best. And what's cool about it is you could play solo, you could play with the group, and because it's a skirmish game, you don't need that many figures. Like the box set that I got when I started was like, I don't remember how much it was because I got it for a present, but I think it's somewhere in the vicinity of $100, and that comes with everything you need, including 2 complete leagues to fight with. So, like literally you get everything in the box. So I think that's a good option if you're looking for something that's kind of in the middle. Insofar as a play-by-post, I have had a couple false starts in trying to play, but if you organize a play-by-post and you're looking for players, I am 100% on board. It's something I really want to try out. I feel like with my new schedule that I have, I might be more apt to do that than other things, because I just find it's hard sometimes for me to sit down and play a game beyond my regular campaign. So I think at this point, I may have left a longer message than your whole episode, as usual. So I'm sitting at the train station. It is very cold. So if I didn't say it already, congratulations on your forthcoming child. I think I might have said it already, I look forward to more content and more inspiration. Tell me more stuff to do so we can make Joe do all the work. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much for the call, Daniel. I'm glad that I was of inspiration, because it's great that Joe's taken it on. As you said, it's a massive undertaking. Sounds like Joe's got the experience to do something like this, and so it's great that he's taken it on, doing all the hard work, and we get to benefit from it. That's the dream. That's what I was hoping when I floated the idea to someone else, that I didn't have to do it. Great point on resolutions and goals. I don't think I'm going to achieve everything that I said there, or maybe even any of it, but I will certainly get something done on those things. And so it's a nice way to focus my effort onto what I want to get achieved, rather than, as you said, and I'm the same. It's very easy to just pick up something new and work on that for a little bit, and then go off to the next new thing. So hopefully I can remind myself of that episode and stick to it on war games and the one-shot nature or potential of them. Even for RPGs, the one-shots tend to go more than one session. So war games do have that advantage, certainly, and they can still be built into campaigns if that's what you prefer. And as you said, even if you do that, it's kind of easier to have large gaps between those battles, because it's kind of less important. You don't need to remember what you said and who you promised what and who was the bartender's name again, all that stuff. I've been meaning to pick up Pulp Alley after listening to your talk with Jason, so I will, and I'll share my thoughts on it, or just reach out to you if I got something to say on it. And then lastly, play by post. Yeah, I think the main perk of it is the flexibility of the schedule. Super hard to find 3 to 4 hours at a consistent time all the time, especially if you're already playing a game. So play by post definitely wins there. It doesn't work out for everyone, of course, and it's not necessarily as engaging. People falling out is pretty common. So I don't know if there's a way to improve that, or if it's just it works for some people and it doesn't work for others. But I will definitely let you know if I do get it running. I'll be recruiting from the podcast and some friends as well. But we'll see. My the time where I need to get it planned is rapidly approaching. I think once it's running, it'll be easier for me. But again, thank you very much for the call. You can find Daniel's stuff in the show notes, Bandits Keep YouTube and the Monsters and Treasure podcast. Next up, I've got a call from Jason of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, and this is an old one. It just didn't fit in my recent episodes, so I apologize. I did want to play it because I appreciate Jason sending it.
Hey Riley, Jason here. Just listened to your episode 004 feedback that you just released. And I hear what you're saying about a setting being useful in an RPG and useful into figuring out the designer's intent. Like Daniel, I like to see the designer's intent written out. I like to see examples of adventures, mainly because it helps you kind of gauge power levels of the bad guys and things like that. Not that I think you have to have a balanced game, but it gives you an idea of where their headspace is when they're creating the game. So I do see that as being useful. But to Decahedron Joe's defense a little bit, while I think if it's somebody's first or second or even third RPG, having all that setting stuff is very useful, I do think for somebody like us, let's be honest, that have played and read a number of different RPGs, releasing just the system without a setting is viable. Now, I don't think that setting is required for somebody experienced with games. So like Savage Worlds, I don't think you have to give any settings with Savage Worlds basic rules for that to be a viable rule set, for example. Same thing with GURPS. So or Rhizus, for that matter. So just my thoughts. I do see what you're saying, and I do find it useful to see that, even if I'm not going to use their setting. But I don't necessarily think it's required for an experienced gamer. So take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much for the call, Jason. Again, I apologize for this being late, because you made some great points, and I feel like I've probably left it a bit long, and the conversation has moved on. Though Daniel did release an episode on completeness in RPGs recently, so maybe it's not, maybe it hasn't moved on just yet. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think the setting can be really important for designer's intent, and the adventures are really great. That's the point I made. So I agree with you agreeing with me. And then the next point, your defensive Joe, I think I am probably pushing the definition of viable beyond its actual definition, when I'm advocating for a setting in a system. So thanks for sharing your thoughts, and for the most part, I agree. Because you're right, there are a ton of games that don't have a setting that work really well and are certainly playable beyond the point of viability. And in some cases, a setting would likely hurt the game, right? Especially when you're talking about these genre agnostic or toolbox style games. I wonder though if they'd benefit from advice on creating a setting in place of having one, right? And I think most of these games do have that, to be honest. They'll have advice for creating inventory lists and considering technology levels. You do that as an example. So yeah, I totally agree. I think, for one, I think I'm a little bit biased or tunnel vision on the types of RPGs that I'm kind of talking about here, mostly D&D fantasy stuff, and so I haven't really considered those other games in my analysis there. So thank you for sharing, Jason. Great points. Jason's details will be in the show notes. He runs the excellent Nerds RPG Variety cast and the blog. Links will be in the show notes. Okay, now on to the rest of the show. There's no RPG theory this time around. I'm expending most of my thought in that direction on the Chainmail deep dive, but I will be talking about a hex crawling supplement for Shadow Dark released by Todd of Hex Press, and talking about my recent games, and closing with some content shoutouts as always. Okay, Of Wood and Wold is the title of the hex crawling supplement that I'll be taking a look at today. I still need to decide what I want to call this section. It's certainly not a review. At best, I've read through the product and I'm just sharing some initial thoughts. I will come up with something punchy eventually. For full transparency, Todd reached out to me as he knew that I'd been running some Shadow Dark and provided this free of charge. And I said I'd take a look at it and that might as well share my thoughts on the blog. Sorry that's taken me a while to actually get around to it, Todd. Also, I'm a fan of Todd's work generally. I think he's a great content creator, makes really positive content. I'm impressed by his dedication to almost daily streams. So this will likely be biased, even if I try not to be. So what is it? Well, it's part explanation of the wilderness exploration procedure and method of play, and part a system for describing and adjudicating that said wilderness exploration. The method, unsurprisingly from the author's name, is hex crawling. The product is short at only 22 pages, but it does a really great job at doing what it sets out to do. I'm going to split my thoughts into 3 topics: the explanation, the rules, and the advanced rules. The explanation. So starting with a quote: "If you want to add elements of navigation, exploration, and expedition into your campaign, then read on." And I think my favorite part of the product is the explanation. Not only is it good at describing how, but it also explains the why. And both of these are often missed in a lot of rule sets. It's simply providing you with movement rates and letting you sort out the rest. In this case, the entire document is interspersed with explanation for each part. The intent here is to make a wilderness exploration procedure that is not dissimilar from dungeon crawling. This is nice as the target audience here is coming from a dungeon crawling game, Shadow Dark, and also allows comparison between the two systems, highlighting the contrast between them and their similarities. There's a good use of tables and diagrams and other images to go alongside the text, which help illustrate the point. And I really like the explanation of how to use and adjudicate using a hex map. All in all, I think this is the best part about it. If you're new to hex crawling or RPGs in general, this is really great. And if you're not, it's still useful to understand how the system works and get the most out of it. Okay, onto the rules. So I mentioned there is a similarity to the dungeon procedure. Well, it's similar to the dungeon procedure of BX, not Shadow Dark, although there's similarities there as well. I personally don't think that's a problem. It's the real-time go around the table system in Shadow Dark. I don't know how that works for this type of play where the party's kind of moving in these large chunks of time, which is probably why it's omitted, and why I'm interested in seeing how Kelsey tackles it in an upcoming product. So I can't really take points off it for not conforming, as even the single page that is dedicated to overland travel in the Shadow Dark rules kind of leaves me confused. The procedure here is basically as follows. The GM describes the party, describes the situation and location. The party decides on an activity. The GM adjudicates that, and time moves forward. Various checks are made depending on how long the party have been exploring, which is, encounter checks like that. Simple, right? No issues issues or bombshells here, so let's keep looking on. We come to terrain, and we get a thorough list provided, with each of these having a difficulty rating in 4 categories: movement, conditions, actions, and challenge. Movement makes sense. The more difficult a terrain is to move in, the slower you'll go. Conditions is a bit confusing at first, but thanks to the explanation, I can wrap my head around it. Basically, the terrain can make various activities harder, so they'll take longer, which is based on the conditions. We'll revisit this when we get to activities. And lastly, encounters and navigation are what you'd expect. Higher difficulties give you more encounters and higher chance to get luck. All good stuff. I think simplifying terrain types down to how they'll actually affect the procedures of play is good. Now we get activities or actions. This is where I'm not quite sold, but it might be a case that I haven't played it out. It actually works much better than I'm imagining. It's a little bit confusing as well, though, as I said, the explanation helps. There's no problem with the actions themselves, which are travel, exploration, camping, and resupply. There might be some problems with the terminology used. For example, the terrain table is talking about conditions when it just applies to actions. I initially had a bit of a disconnect there. Condition sounds like a more generic term that should affect everything. And then travel is an action, but it's already modified by the movement difficulty of a terrain type, so you can have to work that out. And lastly, the worst case scenario for time it takes to complete these actions is 6 turns. It's a 1d6. The 6 is 18 hours to do something. These are minor issues that you can work out, but a little bit of tightening up in this section would help. And as for the time of activities, as I said, this might not be as bad as it seems. I'd need to actually play it. All in all, this is very usable. It gives you, the GM, a system for adjudicating player actions in a consistent and fair way, giving them choices for how they want to explore an environment and engage with the risks of doing so. As the document states, if you want to just go from point A to point B, this system isn't needed. This is about going into the untamed and unexplored wilderness in search for adventure, and this will no doubt let you do it. Another note about Shadowdark compatibility. This is a conversion from Todd's own D6 system, and lots of mechanics are tied to a D6. But Shadowdark appropriate DCs are provided as well, so you've got the option. The D6 chances are provided first, and I think maybe the DCs should be first if this is for Shadowdark. Then the DCs seem off to me. The normal difficulty has a DC of 18 and extreme has a 10. Shadowdark is a rollover system, so you'd be passing extreme checks much more frequently than normal checks. And maybe this is just a case of the GM should be rolling for these, and then succeeding actually causes the bad thing to happen. So if you rolled an 18 plus, you'd have an encounter rather than the other way around. And that does line up to the 1 in 6 chance that's provided for a normal. But it leaves me a bit confused. I think it needs some explanation for how to actually roll these dice if you're using the DC option. Whilst it might make sense for the DCs to be this way, it makes it a bit confused for when a character's attributes might modify the DCs, like they do for getting lost in Shadowdark. I'm not sure if I prefer them to be flipped over and player facing or not. I think maybe I'd remove the DCs from encounter checks, keeping them as a X in 6 chance. Shadowdark uses a 1 in 6 chance for encounters, and then make the other checks player facing. I think that kind of lines up to my expectations of the D20 system. Then we get to the advanced rules. The standard rules aren't really anything new or exciting. They're great and simple procedure that will work. And again, I think what makes the sections up until now really worth it is that explanation that goes alongside everything. This next part starts to delve into new and exciting territory, or perhaps more appropriate, it begins to explore that. The basic idea here is to give terrain type something similar to a monster stat block. We get a HD, in this case hazard die instead of hit die, and then attributes with a handy acronym. HD is effectively a link to an area's difficulty, with normal difficulties equating to a 1 and an extreme difficulty to a 3. There's an option for mountains and hills to instead be an additive effect rather than their own terrain types. So you can have a hilly jungle, which would be 4 hit dice, 3 for the jungle plus 1 for the hills. I think you could add other modifiers here, which would be interesting. There is a bit of a disconnect with the Shadowdark rules here. We get the DCs listed as a 7 plus the hit dice of the terrain. Hazard dice of the terrain. So it gives you a 10 for extreme, same as the original, but a DC of 8 for the normal, which would have been an 18 in the standard rules. And so it flips the DCs on its head, where we had to assume the DM was rolling and succeeding on the check caused the bad thing to happen. Now it's different. However, a couple pages later, we get a a different answer, which I think is the correct one. A task should have a DC set based on its difficulty, easy being a 9, extreme being 18. These are taken from the Shadow Dark rules, or they line up to the Shadow Dark rules. And then the hazard dice modifies this. This gives much more appropriate numbers, so I'll have to assume the 7 plus the HD is a mistake. And then this also lines up with my suggestion for changing the standard rules. Now checks are player facing, with harder checks having the higher DC. Okay, apart from some confusion around DCs, which I think that resolved once you read the full thing and you just ignore that one line or change it, we get to attributes. Now, attributes give a GM a way to diversify the generic types of terrain, and the attributes are turbidity, ruggedness, activity, peril, and scarcity, or traps for short. Each of these attributes are rated similarly to the terrain's hazard die, and a generic terrain type will have the same attribute score as its hazard die. But if we want to make a plane that is infested by bandits, we could up the activity score from the default 1 to a 3, or a higher number, signifying that you're much more likely to run into an encounter than would be typical. And then this number is then used instead of the hit dice when modifying DCs. Right? Further on, we get a explanation for how encounters work for this system, and it clears up the standard rules again. The GM is making the check, and succeeding makes the encounter occur. So we intuited correctly there. But as I said, I think this just needs to be explained earlier in the document before we get to the advanced rules. I think it'd be nice if the way that they worked in the advanced rules are the same way that they work in the standard rules. There's a bunch of explanation for all the attributes and what they mean in both how they affect the fiction and the mechanics, which is good. I won't deep dive into that here, but these are their core, good ideas. You can create unique terrain types when it might matter, or just go with the standard when it doesn't. The document ends with an example which helps tie the system together. Okay, conclusion. Overall, I really like it. There's a few things that should be tightened up around DCs and integration with Shadow Dark, I think, but this system works. It achieves its goal of providing both a simple system to run this style of play, but also allowing the GM to go beyond the basics and add some variety to the wilderness. I think this would be a good product for someone who's running Shadow Dark but wants to run wilderness exploration rather than just dungeon crawls, and is finding the Shadow Dark rules for that lacking, which is at this stage only 1 page, or is new to the style of play and will benefit from the explanation. I think it could use some further expansion. An easy one would be a modifier for roads or trails that's not described here, but doing so also risks the scope of increasing the scope beyond what is necessary. So with that, I'll leave it there. The link for the product is in the show notes, and because I feel a bit bad about getting this for free and that I liked it, I have purchased a community copy over on the itch page. So if someone wants to grab that up after hearing this, please do. Okay, and then on to the quest. Playing better and more often. You know the drill. I've done some more gaming, and I've got quite a bit coming up in the next month, but I mostly want to talk about my Wood game now that we're back from the holiday break. So Wood, the party has had some success. The time of the last update, 0 XP had been earned, and they were just about to dive into Winter's Daughter. And I'm pleased to report that 3 sessions later, they've just finished the module and earned a huge chunk of XP, with most characters being very close to level 3 now. There is a ton of treasure to be earned in this module. There'll be some mild spoilers to follow. I'm going to try and be vague. The initial delve was almost cut short as the party got into a scuffle with some angry defenders of the tomb. They got a taste for level 1 combat and the fragility of their characters. It didn't help that they don't have any fighter types or the money to hire help. So we've got lots of 4 hit point or less and AC 10 to 13 characters. They emerged alive, but only just, and then ran back to town to rest. Heading back the next day, they begun to explore, and even though the sessions are short and they're pretty nervous after their first encounter, but for the most part isn't that dangerous an environment, so they're able to get a decent idea of what's in most of the tomb. This strategy, born of the caution, allows them to scout most of the rooms without risking much, and then making decisions about where to go and what to do with a bunch of information. I like it. I think it's worked to their benefit. I'll maybe need to do a follow-up episode on scouting in dungeons. But after encounter with the ghosts, pleading with them to return a ring which they'd promised to return to a local wizard. The first session came to an end. At the second, I played a duet with a new player, as most of the others couldn't attend. The new player hadn't played D&D before, but took to it pretty well. They're playing a friar, so I had the head priest of the town ask them to follow a group of adventurers, the current party, who'd asked for advice on a lost tomb the previous day. So they scouted out the path that the previous party had taken, sneaked into the crypt behind them, checked a few of the rooms that the party hadn't fully explored yet, and met up with the party to introduce themselves, which took us to the next session. The third and most recent session then has the party make their way to the realm of fairy. They eat some mushrooms for interesting effect and reunite long-lost lovers. Again, there's very little danger here, opportunities for it, but the players, again, use their caution and some clever play to extract quite a bit of treasure, avoiding the dangers mostly by social means. I find myself having to resist the urge not to let players get treasure from just social encounters, thinking that if they're not tackling the risk, then they might not deserve it. But I overcame that urge and was glad I did. Interested to hear if people have thoughts about that in particular. Can you trick or just get treasure from something easily through social means, especially in case it makes sense for them to do that? Is that okay? It just feels very wrong. But as I said, I was glad that I did it. The players used their smarts to get it, and good on them. But then they got confident. With their bags full of loot, they just had to see what was behind a locked door, which they'd already heard monsters on the other side of. So they bust it down and decided to duke it out in melee with no apparent reward in the room. They will learn though. We had 2 of the 4 players go to exactly 0 hit points, potentially saved by a rule introduced in Wood, but they needed magic healing, and the friar was bleeding out on the floor. The reward they just received though, a necklace that could grant a wish. So, now the party have an endless healing potion, and I need to come up with a way to make their life difficult because of it. I've got some ideas which I'll share once they become apparent to the characters, but all up, 12,000 XP earned before being split, which is a hefty chunk. So I think the next session will be resolving, leveling up, returning to town. I wonder if the wizard will be happy with the news they don't have the ring. Wargaming. More games of board action. I played my Japanese against a couple of friends and got my ass handed to me. I was on the back foot after getting hit hard by some artillery at the start of the first turn, having my artillery observer killed before they could call my strike in. I could moan about my luck, and I was unlucky, but I thought I held on pretty well after that. The game went long in terms of time, so we had to call it early. I felt there was a sliver of a chance that I could steal the win if we'd gone to the end, but just a sliver, so I accepted the very likely loss. I'm really struggling to figure out how to play bolt action properly. I find my units don't have much punch, and that I rarely do any permanent damage and destroy units. Something that I need to keep working on. I did get to blow up a tank by rushing it with infantry, though, so that works. It gives me some ideas for the future. I've got 2 games scheduled in February, and then an early war themed event in the start of March. So I'll be pretty busy. I'm looking forward to that. And then I'll probably want to play something else as a palette cleaner. Okay, let's wrap up with some content shoutouts. I've been slacking here. I've been doing lots of reading instead, making my way through The Black Company, which I'm really enjoying. I'm currently on book 7, so getting close to the end, but that doesn't stop great content from being made. So here's a snippet of what you should check out. Number 1, the Anchorite APA. Joe from the Decahedron podcast has launched an amateur press association for TTRPG enthusiasts, taking the name from the community that originally used the Anchor app to record podcasts and call into each other's shows. I'll be contributing, and if it sounds interesting, go check out the website and the episode on Joe's podcast for more info. That'll be in the show notes. 2, BJ over at the Arcane Alienist has been taking a look at the Black Sword hack, posting a review, running through character and world creation. I really like the game, and BJ's episodes are a great overview. And last but not least, Daniel from the Bandits YouTube channel, taking a look at what makes an RPG complete, after Joe from the Decahedron, Evil Jess from Minions and Musings, and I recently podcasted about the topic. Apologies if I missed anyone that released episodes there. I know there were some call-ins from other people as well. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got feedback, the details for that, for contacting me in the show notes. Thanks again, and bye for now.